What if letting go of the one you love could become the first step to healing not just your own heart, but a whole community? On a misty Vermont morning, Grace Foster carried her husband's cat, Jasper, into the Pine Hill Animal Shelter, believing she was surrendering her last piece of family. But one blue-eyed Ragdoll, trembling with grief and clinging to a faded blue collar, would end up rewriting the rules about loss, belonging, and the extraordinary ways animals bring us together. If you believe in second chances and the power of unexpected connections, give this video a like. And if you want to follow more true stories where hope is found in the most surprising places, hit subscribe and join our community. Stay with us, because sometimes the bravest hearts, human and animal, teach us that you never have to choose between love and letting go. The sky over Vermont was barely awake, still clinging to that thin silver mist that hovers just before sunrise. The air outside the Pine Hill Animal Shelter was sharp and quiet, holding the kind of stillness that only comes before something changes forever. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed to life as the morning shift began. That's when Grace Foster stepped from her car, clutching the battered carrier with both hands, as if her entire life was packed inside. Grace was in her early 50s, her hair pulled back into a loose, unbrushed bun, and her eyes rimmed red from a night without sleep. She hesitated at the front door, jaw trembling, taking one more look at the silent shape inside the carrier, a blue-eyed ragdoll cat named Jasper. For a split second, her hand hovered, as if she might turn back. But the weight of her grief pressed her forward. The shelter's door opened with a soft jingle. Sam Tran, the young vet tech who always worked the early shift, looked up from the front desk. Sam noticed immediately that something was wrong. Grace wasn't the usual hurried pet owner or chipper volunteer. Instead, she radiated loss, a kind of emptiness that made even Sam's morning coffee taste bitter. Grace forced a smile. "Hi, I need to surrender my cat." Sam nodded gently, motioning for her to sit at the intake bench. "Let's take care of you both," Sam said, voice calm and practiced, but warm enough to cut through the ache in Grace's words. The intake process felt like a bad dream. Grace tried to answer the questions, voice wobbling each time she said Jasper's name. Date of birth? Not sure. Breed? Ragdoll for sure. Her late husband adored the breed. Why surrender? Grace hesitated, words sticking in her throat. My husband passed away, she finally choked out. I just can't do it alone. He was Jasper's person, not me. I'm not enough. Jasper was quiet at first, curled in the back of the carrier, big blue eyes blinking slowly. But as the paperwork went on, as if sensing something irreversible, he let out a small, desperate meow, a sound so full of heartbreak that Sam flinched. Grace's hand reached through the carrier's bars, trembling. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, she whispered, tears slipping down her face. When Sam moved to open the carrier, Jasper panicked. The moment the latch clicked, Jasper exploded out, claws scrabbling against plastic, fur flying. Chairs crashed, a clipboard clattered to the floor. Jasper made a wild leap for the counter, scattering pens and scattering staff, then darted beneath the benches, meowing with a strange, raw urgency, clinging to his faded blue collar like it was the only piece of his old life he had left. Dr. Lucas Reed, the shelter's veterinarian, rushed in from the back, still in his scrubs. What's going on? He called out, surveying the chaos. Sam crouched low, voice gentle but firm. Easy, buddy. No one's going to hurt you. Come on, Jasper. But Jasper refused. He darted from shadow to shadow, body pressed low, blue collar catching the light every time he moved. Each time Grace called his name, he paused, tail flicking. But the fear was too much. The shelter staff slowly encircled him, Sam talking softly. It's okay. We're here. No one's taking you away. The scene drew the other staff, even a few early volunteers. Everyone stopped to watch, the kind of drama that, even at a shelter, didn't happen every day. There was something different about this cat. His grief was so obvious, his panic so deep, that even the most stoic workers felt it in their chests. No one joked. No one grumbled about the mess. Finally, after nearly 10 minutes of gentle coaxing and softly offered treats, Jasper let Sam scoop him up, pressing his trembling body tight against their chest. Jasper's meow turned to a low, mournful rumble, a sound closer to a human sob than a purr. Sam cradled him, murmuring, "You're safe, little guy. I promise." Grace watched, face streaming with tears. Dr. Reed sat beside her, offering a box of tissues. "You're doing the right thing, you know," he said quietly. "Sometimes love means letting go." But Grace shook her head, unable to answer, eyes fixed on Jasper. It felt wrong. Every cell in her body screamed at her to scoop him back up and run. But grief is a heavy thing, and her own felt impossible to carry with another life depending on her. "He was my husband's cat," she whispered, more to herself than anyone. "He's the last piece I have left. But I can't do this alone." Sam, still holding Jasper, looked up, their eyes shining. "He's hurting, but we'll take good care of him. Maybe we'll figure out what he needs. Sometimes animals are the only ones who understand how we feel. Maybe he'll help someone else too." The morning sunlight broke through the clouds outside, illuminating the blue of Jasper's collar, the tears on Grace's face, the small, hopeful glint in Sam's eyes. The intake room was silent except for Jasper's low, broken meow, a sound that would haunt every staff member for days. And so it began. One life let go, another story just beginning, in that quiet Vermont shelter, surrounded by the evidence of so many endings. A cat's shocking grief planted the seed for a new kind of hope. That afternoon, as a spring storm crept over the Vermont hills, Pine Hill Animal Shelter felt unusually tense. The echoes of Jasper's earlier panic still lingered. Every staff member who'd witnessed it kept replaying his desperate escape and the way he'd clung to Grace's voice. It was a busy day. Puppies barking, phones ringing, volunteers coming and going. But the story of the Ragdoll with the blue collar was on everyone's lips. Sam Tran, exhausted but determined, took special care with Jasper. After his frantic outburst, Jasper had retreated to the quietest corner of the infirmary, curled beneath a fleece blanket in his kennel. He refused to eat, ignored the toys placed by the door, and flinched at every loud sound. His blue eyes tracked Sam's movements, wary but not angry, just lost, as if searching for something or someone he couldn't name. Dr. Lucas Reed stopped by, clipboard in hand, concern clear on his face. "How's our new guest?" he asked softly, peering into the kennel. Sam sighed, crouching beside Jasper. "He's not coming out, won't touch his food, but he let me scratch his chin earlier, just for a second. I've never seen a cat so heartbroken. I think he's in shock." Dr. Reed nodded, then frowned, noticing the old blue collar Jasper still wore. "Did Grace leave any paperwork? Sometimes the vet tag or microchip helps us get some history." Sam reached for Jasper's collar gently. The tag was battered and worn, the text almost illegible except for a single name, Oliver Dane. Not Jasper. Sam blinked, double-checking. "Oliver Dane?" they murmured, confusion sparking. Dr. Reed looked puzzled. "That's odd. Grace kept calling him Jasper. Did she ever mention the collar?" "No, just that her husband rescued him as a stray years ago. Maybe they never changed it?" Sam's curiosity kicked in. They carefully unclipped the tag, reading it over and over. We should check our lost pet database just in case. The shelter kept years of records, flyers, photos, even old social media posts from desperate pet owners. While Jasper stayed tucked away, Sam sat at the reception computer, scrolling through digital files. After a few false starts, Sam froze on an image, a missing cat flyer from 6 years back. The photo showed a fluffy young Ragdoll with piercing blue eyes and the same blue collar, sitting on a sunny porch. The headline, "Missing Cat, Oliver Ragdoll, last seen near Maple Road." The owner's name was Sarah Dane. Sam's heart pounded. The resemblance was uncanny. "No way," they breathed. The details lined up, age, coloring, even the way the cat tilted his head. Could Jasper actually be Oliver, missing for years and living under a new name? Dr. Reed hovered behind, reading over Sam's shoulder. "It's worth asking Grace about. Maybe there's more to this story." Sam called Grace immediately. Her voice was shaky, heavy with fresh regret. She listened in stunned silence as Sam explained the discovery. "Oliver Dane," Grace repeated softly. "I never changed his collar. My husband found him behind the grocery store, scared, thin, half frozen. He just brought him home, and that was that. We called him Jasper. It never crossed my mind. I guess I didn't want to erase his old life." Grace promised to come back that evening with a box of old family photos, hoping they might offer clues. Sam hung up, both nervous and excited. What if this cat wasn't just a symbol of Grace's grief, but also of someone else's loss? As dusk approached, dark clouds piled up over the hills. The wind rattled the shelter's old windows, thunder rumbling in the distance. Volunteers hurried to feed the animals before the worst of the storm. Sam checked on Jasper one last time, coaxing him with a fresh bowl of tuna. Jasper sniffed at the air, but didn't move. By 7 p.m., the sky outside was slate gray, rain pelting the shelter roof. That's when the power suddenly flickered, then went out. The shelter plunged into a murky half-darkness. Emergency lights hummed to life, but shadows seemed to fill every room. "Sam, can you check the windows in the cat ward?" called the shelter manager, voice tense. "Make sure they're all closed. The wind's picking up." Armed with a flashlight, Sam hurried through the narrow halls, double-checking every latch and pane. In the rush and confusion, no one noticed the window above Jasper's kennel hadn't been fully secured after the afternoon cleaning. As the wind howled, the window creaked open a few precious inches. Jasper, who hadn't moved for hours, suddenly became alert. The scent of rain and freedom drifted in. He pressed against the mesh, pawing at the opening. A distant rumble of thunder masked the sound as he squeezed his slender body through, fur slicking back in the wind. Downstairs, Sam was halfway through the safety checks when a chill shot up their spine. Something felt wrong. Racing back to the infirmary, they found the kennel empty. Just a tuft of ragdoll fur on the blanket, and the window wide open. "Jasper?" Sam called, panic rising. Staff rushed in, flashlights darting through the gloom. Everyone searching every corner, every dark cubby. Outside, the rain poured, turning the yard into a sea of mud and shadows. There was no sign of Jasper. As word spread, Grace arrived with her photo box, only to hear the news that Jasper was missing. Her knees buckled, and she clutched the carrier to her chest, sobbing. "I should have never left him. He's all alone out there." Lightning crackled over the trees. Sam and Dr. Reed organized a frantic nighttime search, calling for Jasper with treats and flashlights, voices echoing into the storm. Every staff member felt the weight of the moment. A cat lost not once but twice, carrying two names and a mystery no one yet understood. The rain showed no mercy as they fanned out into the night, hope flickering with every shadow that passed. The storm outside had grown into a wild, unrelenting torrent, sheets of rain hammering the shelter's roof and rattling the loose windows. Thunder boomed across the small Vermont town, turning every familiar street into a maze of muddy rivers and flickering streetlights. But inside the shelter, Sam Tron wasn't thinking about the storm, or the late hour, or their own exhaustion. They were thinking only of Jasper, now lost in the darkness, alone and terrified. Sam had barely slept in the past week, and tonight adrenaline burned away the last of their fatigue. They threw on their raincoat, grabbed a flashlight, and splashed through the parking lot. "Jasper!" Sam's voice cut through the storm, but was swallowed by the wind. The world outside the shelter had transformed. Yards that felt safe in daylight now seemed endless, full of shadows and unknown dangers. Inside her car, Grace clung to Jasper's old photos, her hands shaking. Every time lightning split the sky, she flinched. Guilt gnawed at her. She replayed every decision, every moment she might have done something differently. Jasper had been her husband's last companion, and now she'd let him slip away. Twice. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to the empty passenger seat. "Please come back." Back at the shelter, Dr. Reed coordinated the staff and volunteers, splitting them into small groups. Everyone searched with quiet, urgent purpose. No one complained about the rain, not after seeing the grief etched on Grace's face or remembering the desperate way Jasper had meowed that morning. Even the old handyman, Mr. Evers, who usually grumbled about damn cats, took a flashlight and joined in, muttering, "Not on my watch." Sam headed out alone, heart pounding. They checked every place a frightened cat might hide, under porches, in the thick brambles behind the shelter, between the stacked firewood at the edge of the woods. Each time their flashlight beam caught a glint of eyes, raccoon, opossum, someone's outdoor tabby, hope rose and then crashed down. "Jasper!" Sam called, again and again, voice hoarse and wet from rain. Meanwhile, the news of Jasper's escape had begun to spread. Shelter volunteers texted friends and neighbors. "Have you seen a blue-eyed ragdoll cat? Answers to Jasper, or maybe Oliver." Within an hour, porch lights blinked on all over the neighborhood. Kids peered out windows. One family put a bowl of tuna on their back steps, just in case. Sam reached the backyards along Maple Road, where the storm seemed to grow even more intense. The wind whipped at their face and their boots sank into mud. They knelt by a sagging fence, shining the light into every nook and cranny. Something inside them twisted, a guilt that felt personal, a fear they'd never known before. Jasper wasn't just another intake. He was the kind of animal who changed the energy of a room, who drew out the best in people just by being gentle, by trusting even when it hurt. Time dragged. Sam's clothes were soaked through, their breath coming in ragged bursts. A stray branch whipped across their cheek, but they barely noticed. They pressed on, desperate. Suddenly, a faint sound cut through the rain, a soft, trembling meow, barely audible above the storm's howl. Sam stopped, heart hammering. "Jasper?" They shined the flashlight under the porch of an old white house. There, hunched and shivering, was Jasper. Mud caked his beautiful coat. His blue eyes shone wide with fear, and his whole body shook in the cold. Sam dropped to their knees, pushing the light aside. "Hey, buddy. It's me." They reached out, slow and careful, their voice low and steady despite the fear threatening to choke them. "You're okay, I promise. You're safe." Jasper pressed deeper into the shadows at first, his body tense, ears flat. He watched Sam with a look that was part hope, part terror. Sam reached into their pocket, pulled out a handful of kibble, and set it gently on the ground. Minutes passed. The rain pounded. Jasper's eyes never left Sam's. Sam didn't move, barely dared to breathe. Finally, so slowly it seemed like a dream, Jasper crept forward, inch by inch, until his nose touched Sam's soaked hand. Sam bit back tears, relief washing through them. Very gently, Sam scooped Jasper into their arms, cradling him close. Jasper was shaking, but he didn't resist. Instead, he pressed his head against Sam's shoulder, letting out a long, shuddering sigh. For a moment, the world was only the two of them, one human, one cat, sharing a shelter against the storm. Sam hurried back through the rain, clutching Jasper to their chest, calling out to the others. When Grace heard that Jasper was found, she stumbled from her car, tears streaming down her cheeks. She watched as Sam carried Jasper inside, whispering comfort the whole way. Back in the warmth of the shelter, Dr. Reed checked Jasper for injuries while Sam towel-dried his muddy fur. Jasper barely moved, except to keep his eyes on Sam. He seemed to recognize in Sam a kindred spirit, someone who understood what it meant to be lost and afraid, and to hope for kindness anyway. That night, as the storm finally passed and the shelter settled into an uneasy quiet, Sam sat beside Jasper's kennel, not leaving until the cat fell into an exhausted sleep. Sam knew, somehow, in a way that words couldn't capture, that this night had changed them both. Jasper had come into the shelter a lost soul, a remnant of someone else's grief. But now, tangled in a web of new connections and second chances, he was more than just a sad story. For Sam, this moment, the cold mud, the wild hope, the trembling purr, marked the beginning of a bond that felt deeper than chance. And for Jasper, lying in the safe circle of Sam's arms, the storm outside seemed to finally quiet, replaced by a small, bright spark of trust. By the next morning, the storm had washed Vermont clean. Sunlight glittered on puddles in the shelter parking lot, and mist curled above the grass. Inside Pine Hill Animal Shelter, the world felt softer but heavy with questions. Jasper, exhausted from his ordeal, curled up in the warmest corner of his kennel, paws tucked under his chin, his blue eyes flickering open every time Sam Tron passed by. Only with Sam nearby did Jasper seem to relax, sometimes reaching a tentative paw through the bars, as if seeking proof that he wasn't alone. Sam hardly left Jasper's side. After last night, they felt a strange responsibility, almost like fate had tethered them together. Even the grumpiest volunteers noticed. "He's attached to you," one remarked, shaking her head with a smile. "You're his person now, whether you like it or not." Sam just shrugged, pretending to be casual, but they felt it in their bones, the kind of bond that came only after sharing a storm. Jasper's appetite returned, but only in Sam's presence. He ignored the other staff, eyes fixed on the door until Sam's familiar footsteps echoed in. When Sam knelt beside the kennel and murmured encouragement, Jasper would finally eat, his trust slow but growing stronger with every meal. Late that morning, Grace returned. Her hands shook as she held a faded shoebox filled with photographs, and her eyes darted around the lobby, half expecting Jasper to leap into her arms. The staff welcomed her with gentle smiles, aware of the guilt that haunted her since Jasper's escape. Sam greeted her warmly. "He's safe now," they said softly. "He hasn't let me out of his sight." Grace managed a weak laugh, tears shimmering. "That sounds like him." She opened the box, spreading the photos on the table. Birthdays, holidays, quiet afternoons by the fire. In each picture, Jasper was present, sometimes lounging on Grace's late husband's lap, sometimes perched by the window, always wearing the same blue collar. One photograph caught Sam's attention. Grace and her husband, both younger, grinning in front of a Christmas tree, when Jasper sat between them, wide-eyed, the blue collar clear as day. Sam examined the collar closely, curiosity piqued by yesterday's discovery, the tag that read Oliver Dane. Something nagged at them. They picked up the collar, feeling along its inside seam. Their fingers brushed something sharp, a tiny, weathered scrap of paper tucked inside, hidden from casual view. Carefully, Sam pulled it free. There, written in faded blue ink, was a phone number. "Grace, did you ever notice this?" Sam asked. Grace shook her head, stunned. "No, my husband must have missed it. Or maybe he just left it. I don't know." Sam and Grace exchanged a look, both realizing Jasper's story wasn't over. If the phone number still worked, maybe it would finally explain the mystery behind Jasper's 2 names, 2 lives. "We should try calling it," Sam suggested, their heart thumping with anticipation. Grace nodded, her hands trembling as she wiped away tears. While waiting, Sam brought Jasper out to the visitation room. Jasper immediately pressed himself against Sam's legs, eyes wide as he scanned the new space. Grace knelt, arms outstretched, tears streaming. "Hi, sweet boy," she whispered. Jasper hesitated, then, with surprising gentleness, allowed Grace to pet him. For a moment, all 3 were silent, each grieving for what was lost, each clinging to hope for what might still be found. Sam made the call from the staff office, hands shaking. The phone rang, once, twice, 3 times. Finally, a woman's voice answered, hesitant. "Hello? Hi, my name is Sam Tran. I work at the Pine Hill Animal Shelter in Vermont. I found your number in a cat's collar. He goes by Jasper now, but his tag says Oliver Dane. Do you know anything about a lost cat?" There was a sharp intake of breath, followed by silence. Sam's heart pounded in the gap. Then the woman spoke, voice trembling. "Oh my God. Oliver? I thought he was gone forever. Are you sure? Is he okay?" Sam reassured her, briefly explaining Jasper's rescue and current state. The woman, introducing herself as Sarah Dane, began to cry softly. "He disappeared after my divorce. My son was devastated. We searched everywhere, but he was just gone." Sam promised to email photos and suggested Sarah come visit. "We want to do what's best for him. He's become a very special cat to a lot of people here." Grace, overhearing the call, wiped away tears as she listened. When Sam relayed the details, she was silent, processing what it meant. Jasper had belonged to someone else first, another family, another life. Yet here he was, the thread tying strangers together, a living bridge between past and present, grief and hope. The rest of the day passed in a gentle flurry. Sam and Grace sat together, swapping memories, searching the old photos for clues. Dr. Reed stopped by with treats, marveling at Jasper's calm in Sam's arms. "You know," he mused, "sometimes animals find the people who need them the most. Maybe that's what Jasper's been doing all along, helping us all heal, one home at a time." As the sun set, Jasper curled up on Sam's lap, finally at peace, while Grace stroked his fur, whispering her thanks. In that small, sunlit room, the 3 of them traced the fragile footprints of a life that refused to be forgotten. And outside, Vermont's spring quietly promised new beginnings. The news that Jasper might be Oliver Dane sent a ripple through Pine Hill Animal Shelter. Even the staff who'd only known him for a day or 2 began to see him differently, as a living mystery, a bridge between 2 families, carrying unspoken history in every slow, careful step. Sam Tran felt it more than anyone. the strange weight of responsibility pressing down as they dialed the number again, this time with a new sense of purpose. The voice on the other end, Sarah Dane, sounded steadier but guarded, as if the shock of hope was almost too much to bear. Sarah's story tumbled out in fragments over the phone. She lived in a nearby town and taught middle school English. Years ago, after a difficult divorce, her world had fallen apart. Her son, Eli, had clung to their cat Oliver for comfort. But during the move, Oliver vanished, either slipping out the back door or escaping in the chaos of packing. "We put up flyers everywhere," Sarah said, her voice catching. "He was more than a pet. He was family. After that, well, we lost more than just a cat." Sam listened, heart twisting. They could hear the pain behind Sarah's words, the kind of ache that never fully fades. "He's safe now," Sam assured her. "He's changed, but there's still something so gentle about him. I think you should come meet him." Sarah hesitated. "I'll talk to Eli. It's been so long. I don't know if he'll remember us." Meanwhile, Grace sat in the corner of the visitation room, clutching Jasper close, her eyes never leaving the cat's face. She listened to Sam's half of the call, her thoughts tangled and raw. The possibility that Jasper, her Jasper, had belonged to someone else before her was both painful and strangely comforting. Maybe all the love her husband had given the cat, all those quiet nights and gentle hands, had been part of a larger journey. When Sam finished the call, they explained the plan. Sarah and her son would come to the shelter the next afternoon. Grace nodded, her face a mask of complicated emotions, relief, anxiety, and a flicker of fear. "What if he doesn't want to go back?" she asked quietly. "What if he's happier with me?" She bit her lip, knowing how selfish the words sounded, but unable to let them go. Sam put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We'll let Jasper show us what he wants. He's been through enough. We won't rush him." The next day dawned cold and bright. Grace arrived early, wearing her best sweater, clutching Jasper's favorite toy in one hand. Sam busied themselves with chores, nerves humming. Dr. Reed gave Jasper a checkup, marveling at how calm he seemed with Sam around. "He's a survivor," Dr. Reed murmured. "Cats don't forget kindness, even after years." At noon, a car pulled up outside the shelter. Sarah Dane stepped out, tall and pale, her brown hair pulled into a neat ponytail. Beside her stood Eli, a teenager with a mop of curly hair, hands jammed deep into his pockets. He looked older than the photos in the shelter's files, taller but with the same serious eyes. Both mother and son paused outside, bracing themselves. Inside, Sam prepared the visitation room, setting out a soft blanket, a bowl of water, and Jasper's old blue collar. Grace lingered near the door, heart in her throat. The staff hovered, torn between wanting to help and needing to give space. Sarah and Eli entered quietly, every movement hesitant. Sarah's eyes swept the room, landing on Jasper in Sam's arms. For a moment she stood frozen, lips trembling. Eli stared at the cat, searching for something familiar in the shape of his ears, the pattern of his fur. "Oliver?" Sarah whispered, her voice almost lost in the hush. Jasper lifted his head, studying the newcomers with wary curiosity. Eli stepped forward, digging into his backpack and pulling out an old plush mouse, faded, missing one ear. "He used to love this," Eli said, setting it gently on the floor. "It always made him come running." Jasper didn't move. His eyes flicked from the toy to Eli, then to Sam, then back. The room seemed to hold its breath. Sarah knelt, tears shining in her eyes. "We missed you, sweetheart. Every day." Grace, unable to watch, turned away, hugging herself tight. She remembered all the nights Jasper had slept at her husband's feet, all the times he'd sat on the windowsill watching the world pass by. Was it possible that another family missed him just as fiercely? Sam crouched down, placing Jasper on the blanket between the two families. Jasper sat, tense but calm, tail wrapped tight around his paws. Eli didn't try to touch him, just sat cross-legged, talking softly about the things he remembered. The sunspot in their old kitchen, the way Oliver would chase string, the sound of Sarah's laugh. His voice cracked, raw with hope and fear. Minutes passed, slow and tender. Jasper edged closer to the plush mouse, sniffed it, and batted it once. Eli's face broke into a hopeful grin. Sarah pressed her hands to her mouth, sobbing softly. Dr. Reed, watching from the hallway, turned to Sam. This isn't just a reunion. It's a healing, for all of them. But for Grace, it was something different, a tearing and a mending at once. She understood for the first time that love wasn't about possession, or even about history. It was about giving a soul a place to heal and letting go when the time came. As the afternoon waned, both families sat together, sharing stories and memories, laughter mingling with tears. The prospect of reunion brought hope, but also a deep, aching anxiety. What if Jasper didn't remember his old family, or didn't want to leave Grace? What if he chose someone, and the others had to say goodbye all over again? The question hung in the air, unresolved, as Jasper curled up between Eli and Grace, choosing for the moment not to choose at all. The next day at Pine Hill Animal Shelter dawned with a rare quiet. The world outside was washed clean by last week's storms, and even the air inside the shelter felt changed, charged with expectation and an undercurrent of dread. Sam Tron stood in the visitation room, arms folded tightly, watching the sunlight creep across the floor and listening to the murmured voices in the hallway. Jasper, nestled in his usual spot by the window, seemed to sense that something big was about to happen. He licked a paw, then glanced nervously at Sam, as if searching for reassurance. It was almost noon when Sarah Dane and her son Eli returned. Their car rolled slowly into the parking lot, both passengers visible through the glass, sitting in a silence that said everything words could not. Sarah's hands trembled as she adjusted her hair in the mirror. Eli kept his headphones draped around his neck, lips pressed tight together. Today, they weren't just visitors. They were hopeful, hearts on their sleeves family, coming to see if the cat they'd lost was truly theirs. Grace waited too, sitting on a bench just outside the visitation room, her hands twisted in her lap. She'd barely slept, replaying every detail of yesterday's meeting. A part of her felt like an intruder in her own life, worried she would lose Jasper, and afraid that her husband's memory might be swept away with him. But mostly, she wanted Jasper to be happy, whatever that looked like. Dr. Lucas Reed gathered everyone together, Sam, Grace, Sarah, and Eli, reminding them to keep the room calm, to let Jasper set the pace. No expectations, he cautioned. Just let him be. When they entered, Jasper froze at first, tail twitching. His eyes flickered from Grace to Sam to Sarah and Eli. The tension in the air was thick enough to feel. Sarah knelt, holding out a familiar old collar, the one he wore years ago, with Oliver Dane barely legible on the tag. Eli carried the plush mouse toy from the day before, holding it out at arm's length, barely breathing. Minutes ticked by in silence. Jasper sniffed the air, ears perked, every muscle tight. Sam sat cross-legged on the floor, a quiet presence, whispering encouragement. Eli scooted closer, gently rolling the mouse toward Jasper. letting it stop just in front of his paws. "Hey, buddy," Eli said, his voice steady but soft. "It's okay if you don't remember us. I just wanted to see you again." Jasper didn't move at first. The plush mouse sat between him and Eli, a bridge built from memory and hope. Sarah spoke, voice trembling but clear. "Oliver, Jasper, we missed you. You were such a good boy. You used to wake me up every morning, remember? And you always loved tuna." For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, Jasper crept forward, his body low to the ground, as if every step cost him a piece of his fear. He sniffed the mouse, then looked at Eli, his blue eyes searching the boy's face for some buried memory. Eli reached out, palm up, waiting. Jasper hesitated, glancing back at Sam, as if seeking permission. Sam gave a gentle nod. Jasper took the final step, touching his nose to Eli's hand. It was a small thing, a cat pressing his nose to a boy's palm. But in that moment, something opened. Eli's face crumpled with relief and joy. "That's him," Eli whispered, tears slipping down his cheeks. "He remembers." Jasper stepped into Eli's lap, curling up like he had done so many times in the past. He butted his head against Eli's chest, rumbling with a deep, familiar purr. Sarah covered her mouth, tears streaming as she knelt beside her son and stroked Jasper's silky fur. The years melted away for a moment, and grief gave way to reunion. Grace watched, her heart torn between happiness for the boy and her own sense of loss. But then something unexpected happened. Jasper turned, stretching out a paw toward Grace, his eyes meeting hers. She knelt beside Eli, reaching out to scratch behind Jasper's ears. Jasper purred louder, as if declaring, "I remember you both." The shelter staff peeked through the door, many wiping their eyes. Even Dr. Reed, who prided himself on being all business, had to turn away, swallowing a lump in his throat. Sam sat back, overwhelmed by the outpouring of emotion. They had known Jasper was special, but watching him reconnect with his old family and still seek out Grace made them believe that animals could teach people something profound about forgiveness and love. After the initial excitement faded, everyone sat together, letting Jasper move between them, basking in the attention. Sarah told stories of Oliver's kitten days, how he used to sleep in laundry baskets, chase Eli's shoelaces, and curl up in bed during thunderstorms. Grace added her own memories, how Jasper had helped her husband through chemotherapy, how he'd kept her company during the darkest months after the funeral. There were tears, but there was laughter too, and in that room, the lines between old and new family began to blur. The visit lasted nearly an hour. When it was time to leave, Sarah and Eli said their goodbyes, promising to return soon. Eli left the plush mouse for Jasper, who batted it playfully and then carried it back to his blanket. Grace and Sam stayed behind, watching Jasper settle down with his old toy. "I guess he remembers everything," Grace said softly. Sam nodded. "He remembers everyone who ever loved him. That's what makes him special." As the sun dipped behind the shelter, Jasper stretched and yawned, his world a little bigger than before. 2 families, 1 cat, and the hope that somehow there could be enough love to go around. For days after the recognition, the Pine Hill Animal Shelter buzzed with conversations about Jasper, now also Oliver, a cat whose story seemed to blur the lines between belonging and letting go. Staff whispered about the reunion in the break room. Volunteers checked on him more than usual, and even visitors who'd never met him asked about the miracle cat with 2 families. It was as if everyone in the little Vermont town needed a reminder that second chances were possible. But under the surface, an anxious question simmered. What happens next? Jasper's world had grown, but now the people who loved him most were caught between hope and heartbreak. Grace found herself waking up each morning with her heart in her throat, wondering if today would be the day she had to say goodbye for good. She watched Jasper with new eyes, noticing how he had changed. He still slept in the sunny spot in her kitchen, still came running when she opened a can of tuna, but now he also sat by the door at odd hours, looking out as if expecting someone. At times, Grace felt like a guest in her own home, a familiar sadness hovering just behind every tender moment. Meanwhile, Sarah and Eli visited the shelter as often as their busy schedules allowed. Each time, Jasper greeted them at the door with cautious excitement, sniffing Eli's fingers and brushing against Sarah's legs before returning to Sam or curling up next to Grace. The visits became a ritual, a slow rebuilding of trust that spanned both memory and new beginnings. Sarah brought old photos and a battered blanket from their former house. Eli downloaded a playlist of songs he used to play for Oliver at bedtime. They laughed about old habits and inside jokes, the three humans gently circling the idea that love might be big enough to hold all their stories. One sunny afternoon, the shelter director called a meeting with all the key players: Grace, Sarah, Eli, Sam, and Dr. Reed. They gathered in the sunlit visitation room, where Jasper now lounged contentedly, eyes half closed as if he could feel the gravity of the moment. The director, Miss Whitaker, was an older woman with steely hair and a no-nonsense manner, but even she softened as she looked at Jasper. "This isn't a normal adoption situation," she began, hands folded on the table. "Jasper, or Oliver, has two families who clearly love him deeply. The law says we could go by microchip registration, but honestly, I think we all know there's more to this than paperwork." Sarah nodded, swallowing hard. "He was our Oliver for years, but he's also been Jasper for just as long. I don't want to hurt anyone, least of all him. Eli and I only want what's best." Grace took a shaky breath, twisting a tissue in her hands. "He was my husband's last companion. After he died, Jasper saved me from drowning in my own grief. But now I wonder if I've just been holding on because I was afraid to let go." Eli sat silently for a long time, watching Jasper bat at his plush mouse toy. Finally, he spoke. "What if he doesn't have to choose? I mean, he remembered both of us, didn't he? Maybe he could have two homes. I'd rather see him happy than have him all to myself." Miss Whitaker smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "That's a wise answer, Eli, but it would take a lot of trust and communication. Shared custody isn't common for pets, but it isn't impossible. What do you all think?" The adults exchanged hesitant, hopeful glances. Sam spoke up, their voice warm and steady. "He's a gentle soul. He's shown he can bond with more than one person. If everyone's willing, maybe Jasper can show us a new way to think about family. We could set up a schedule, split weeks, or alternate weekends. We'd need clear rules, and everyone's got to agree to put Jasper first." Dr. Reed nodded. "We'd also need to make sure the transition isn't stressful for him. Start with short visits, make sure he feels safe, keep his routines steady." The proposal sat in the room like sunlight, slow and hopeful. Grace and Sarah looked at each other, two women who had arrived at opposite ends of the same story, now joined by their love for a stubborn, beautiful cat. "I want him to be happy," Grace said softly, her eyes shining. "Even if that means learning to let go a little." Sarah reached over, squeezing Grace's hand. "We could try it. See how he does. Maybe we could even become friends." Eli grinned at that, the first real smile anyone had seen from him all week. He always did like bringing people together. Word spread quickly about the shared custody cat. The shelter's Facebook post about Jasper's story was shared hundreds of times. Local newspapers called, asking for interviews. Soon, the town was buzzing with debates, at the grocery store, at school, at the coffee shop, about what was truly best for a pet. Some people thought animals belonged in one home, while others said Jasper's situation was a lesson in compassion and second chances. At the shelter, Jasper seemed to sense the excitement and the uncertainty. He grew more playful, more affectionate, as if trying to reassure both families that he was content no matter where he landed. On alternating afternoons, he would curl up with Eli for a nap and then chase shadows in Grace's sunroom. Sometimes, he'd just sit in the middle of the floor, watching the people who loved him, his steady purr filling the room like a promise. That evening, as Grace and Sarah walked out together for the first time, Sam watched from the doorway, heart full. Jasper sat by the window, tail twitching, watching them go, not torn between two worlds, but stretching the very idea of family to fit all the love around him. The weeks that followed saw Jasper, Oliver to some, always himself, at the center of a quiet miracle. The shared custody experiment began with caution. A few hours at Sarah and Eli's apartment, then back to Grace's familiar bungalow for the night. At first, everyone was tense, watching for signs that Jasper would become confused, withdrawn, or upset. Instead, they saw something that surprised even the most seasoned shelter staff. Jasper seemed to bloom. On days with Grace, Jasper kept old routines, curled by the window, napped on the faded blue armchair, chased dust motes in the late afternoon sun. He'd wake from his naps and meow until Grace sat down with him, her laughter lighter now that she wasn't carrying her grief alone. She started leaving the radio on when she was out, so Jasper would hear familiar voices, and just as Dr. Reed had suggested, she kept his favorite blanket and toys close. When it was time to visit Sarah and Eli, Grace would pack Jasper's carrier and his favorite things. The drive across town became a ritual. Jasper's first visit was tentative. He slunk around the edges of Sarah's living room, nose twitching, eyes wide. Eli sat quietly on the floor, rolling the plush mouse back and forth, waiting. Bit by bit, Jasper explored. First the corners, then the couch, then the sun-drenched windowsill where Sarah placed his old blanket. There were moments of anxiety. Jasper would sometimes hide under the bed when the house creaked or a new scent drifted in. But as the days passed, Jasper's world expanded, and with it, his confidence. Eli, always patient, found new ways to bond. He started a blog, Oliver's Second Chance, sharing Jasper's story with classmates and neighbors. He posted pictures of Jasper in both homes, curled up on Grace's lap, perched on Sarah's kitchen counter, sprawled in a beam of sunlight with the plush mouse clutched between his paws. The blog took off. Comments and messages poured in from across Vermont and beyond. People wrote about their own lost pets, about hope and forgiveness, about the families animals help create. Grace and Sarah began talking more, exchanging notes in Jasper's travel bag about his moods, favorite treats, and vet appointments. They became unlikely friends, bonded by the cat who'd once been the symbol of everything they'd lost. Sarah invited Grace over for coffee on handoff days, and the two women began sharing their lives beyond just Jasper. Memories of Grace's late husband, Sarah's struggles as a single mom, Eli's challenges at school, the small victories that only someone who has known real loss can truly understand. As summer arrived, the Pine Hill Animal Shelter hosted its first annual Second Chances Day, a community event inspired by Jasper's journey. Sam Tran organized games and story circles. Dr. Reed offered free checkups for rescued pets. The main event was a parade of alumni, animals who'd been adopted from the shelter and come back, tails wagging or whiskers twitching, to show the power of resilience and the healing of new beginnings. Jasper, resplendent in a blue bow tie, became the unofficial Grand Marshal. He rode on a decorated wagon pulled by Eli, flanked by both Grace and Sarah. The crowd cheered, laughing and wiping away tears as they listened to Eli read aloud from his blog. Sometimes you don't get to pick just one home. Sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get two families instead of none. And maybe, if you're really brave, you can help other people take a second chance too. Jasper's story caught the attention of the local newspaper, which ran a front-page feature, "The Cat Who Brought a Town Together." Reporters interviewed Sam about the shelter's new approach to blended adoptions and asked Grace and Sarah what advice they'd give to other families struggling with loss. Their answer was simple but profound. Don't be afraid to open your heart twice. For Jasper, the new arrangement wasn't always easy. There were days he seemed restless, wandering from room to room in Sarah's apartment, or times when he refused his favorite treat at Grace's. Both families learned to watch for signs: an anxious tail, a missed meal, a meow that sounded just a bit off. But they also discovered new ways to comfort him: a shared toy, a blanket that carried the scent of both homes. Long stretches of time spent together so that Jasper would never feel like he was being traded or lost again. The blog became a lifeline for other pet owners too. Eli shared stories from other families, stories of reunions after years apart, of rescued animals who helped heal broken hearts, of kids learning that love doesn't have to fit inside neat lines. Soon, the Second Chances message board was filled with photos, poems, and letters from people who'd found hope through Jasper's journey. One night, as fireflies blinked in the backyard and Jasper purred in a patch of moonlight, Grace and Sarah sat together on the porch, watching Eli toss treats to their shared cat. "I used to think letting go was the hardest thing in the world," Grace said quietly. "But maybe it's not about letting go. Maybe it's about making room." Sarah nodded, her eyes soft. "He's shown us how to do that, how to love without fear." Jasper blinked up at them, his eyes wise and gentle. For the first time in a long time, both women felt whole, not because they'd reclaimed what they'd lost, but because they'd built something new. As Second Chances Day drew to a close, the shelter staff gathered for a group photo. Jasper lounged in the center, tail wrapped neatly, purring as Sam snapped the picture. Around him, people smiled, knowing they were all part of something rare, a true blended family, made possible by the quiet courage of a single cat who refused to give up on love. As summer faded and Vermont's maples began their slow transformation, the town was still talking about Jasper, the cat who'd crossed so many boundaries. The story of his two families and the way he had become a symbol of resilience, hope, and unconventional love had found its way into local conversation, online forums, and even classroom discussions. It was fitting, then, that the Pine Hill Animal Shelter hosted a community talk titled "Second Chances: What Animals Teach Us About Belonging." Inside the community hall, folding chairs filled quickly. At the front, Grace, Sarah, Eli, and Sam Tran sat in a circle with Dr. Reed, who would moderate the event. Jasper himself lounged comfortably in a carrier lined with his favorite blanket, half hidden beneath the table, his blue eyes surveying the scene. Dr. Reed opened the discussion with a gentle question. "What has Jasper's journey taught you?" Grace was the first to speak. She looked down at her hands, thinking about the past year, her husband's death, the grief that had nearly drowned her, the day she had surrendered Jasper, and all that had happened since. "When I first brought Jasper to the shelter, I thought I was letting go because I couldn't handle any more pain. I blamed myself for not being strong enough, for not being able to keep the last piece of my husband's memory. But loving Jasper meant something harder than holding on. It meant being willing to do what was best for him, not for me. She paused, wiping away a tear. I realized that I'd been clinging to the past out of fear. Healing only began when I put Jasper's happiness above my own. Sarah nodded, her own eyes shining. I spent years blaming myself for losing Oliver. The divorce was hard enough, but losing him made it feel like everything good was slipping away. When Sam called, it was as if a door I'd locked long ago had been cracked open. At first, I just wanted to go back, to fix the past, to have my family whole again. But meeting Grace and sharing Jasper with her and Eli taught me something new. Second chances aren't about erasing the past. They're about making something better out of what's left. By sharing Jasper, I was able to heal wounds I thought would never close. It brought Eli and me closer, and it taught me to forgive myself. Eli sat forward, a quiet strength in his voice. At first, I just wanted Oliver back. I didn't care how. I wanted things the way they used to be. But seeing how much Jasper meant to Grace made me realize love isn't about owning someone or something. It's about letting your heart grow, letting new people in. Jasper showed me that you can belong in more than one place and you can love more than one family. I don't feel like I lost him anymore. I feel like I gained more people who care. Sam cleared their throat, voice a little shaky. I always thought my job at the shelter was about helping animals. But Jasper taught me it's really about helping people, too. It's about connecting broken families, giving hope to people who feel alone, and teaching by example what real compassion looks like. Watching these families come together, watching Jasper trust again after so much loss, made me believe that my work matters, not just for the animals, but for the community. Dr. Reed turned the conversation to the room, and community members began to share their own stories of lost pets found, of families blended by chance or circumstance, of forgiveness and letting go. The talk moved from personal pain to big-picture lessons. A local teacher spoke up. Jasper's story became a lesson in my classroom. We talked about what it means to belong, about empathy, about what it takes to put someone else's needs above your own. Another audience member, an elderly man, added, "I lost my wife last year. I thought my world was over. But seeing how these families shared their grief and grew stronger made me think maybe there's hope for me, too." Sam summarized the shelter's new philosophy. Every animal that comes through our doors carries a history we may never fully know. But if we're willing to look deeper, to be patient, and to trust, second chances are possible. Not just for them, but for us. The talk ended with a standing ovation, not just for Jasper, but for everyone who'd had the courage to act for another's happiness rather than their own comfort. After the event, Grace, Sarah, Eli, and Sam lingered together, talking quietly as Jasper purred at their feet. The weight of the past felt lighter. Grace reached out, taking Sarah's hand. "I never thought I could let go and find peace. But here we are, different people than we were a year ago." Sarah smiled. "That's the gift Jasper gave us, the freedom to move forward." Eli knelt to pet Jasper, whispering, "You're a pretty wise cat, you know that?" Sam looked around at the small circle of friends, people who'd started as strangers, now united by a single resilient animal. "If only the world could learn from him," Sam said quietly. "Maybe there'd be a few more second chances for all of us." As the evening light faded, the community hall emptied, but something had shifted in the air. Jasper's journey became more than a story. It became a living metaphor, that everyone carries invisible histories and pain, but with patience and trust, second chances and blended families can lead to deeper healing than any perfect storybook ending. And so, with the town's blessing, Jasper's story rippled outward, teaching everyone who listened that home isn't a place or a name. It's the space we create by loving bravely, forgiving deeply, and believing that no matter how lost we feel, there is always a path home. 1 year after the stormy morning when Jasper first arrived at Pine Hill Animal Shelter, Vermont had cycled through all 4 seasons, each one leaving its mark on the town and its people. The story of Jasper, Oliver to some, always both and more, was no longer just a local curiosity. It had become a gentle legend, shared in classrooms, at family dinners, and across social media posts. People who'd never met him knew his blue eyes and soft gray coat, and everyone, it seemed, had drawn something from his journey. Summer had returned. The days were long and golden, the trees full and heavy with new life. On the morning of the town's annual adoption fair, the shelter buzzed with excitement. Banners hung from the porch reading "Second Chances Start Here." Tables were covered in baked goods, handmade toys, and photos of animals who'd found new homes. At the center of it all, sprawled on a picnic blanket between Eli and Grace, was Jasper. Sarah knelt close by, a book of stories for children in her lap, and Sam Tran, with a satisfied smile, handed out pamphlets about blended adoptions. Jasper looked older, perhaps, but in that special way animals age, his fur still plush and soft, his eyes wise and content. He watched the crowds with calm interest, never startled, always serene. People approached with quiet reverence, some just to pet him, others to tell their own stories about second chances. Jasper accepted every touch, every whispered word, with the patience of someone who had lived many lives. Eli, now taller and a little more confident, took the microphone to address the small crowd. "A year ago, I thought I'd lost Oliver forever. I was angry and sad, and all I wanted was for things to go back to the way they used to be. But what I learned is that home isn't a place, and it isn't even just the people you started with. It's the people you find, and the people you choose to let in." Jasper showed me that you can belong in more than one place, and that loving more people doesn't mean you love anyone less. Grace smiled, her heart full as she listened. She'd changed, too, less haunted by loss, more open to new connections. The house that once felt too quiet now rang with laughter, visits from Sarah and Eli, and afternoons spent sharing stories on the porch. Letting go hadn't erased the past, but had made space for new memories, and for a kind of happiness she'd once thought was out of reach. Sarah read aloud a story she'd written for the event, a children's book inspired by Jasper. Once upon a time, there was a cat who had 2 names and 2 families. He loved them both, and they loved him back, even when things were hard. In the end, he found that love wasn't something you run out of, or something you have to choose. It was a bridge you could build, and if you were brave enough to walk across, you might find home on both sides. Sam watched the scene, their hearts swelling with quiet pride. The shelter had changed because of Jasper, not just in policy, but in spirit. They'd started a Second Chances program, pairing senior animals with families who'd lost pets and offering blended adoptions for cases like Jasper's. The staff, once wary of anything unconventional, now talked about empathy, resilience, and the courage to try new solutions. That afternoon, a family arrived at the fair, carrying an anxious dog who had bounced through 3 foster homes. They asked if their dog might ever settle, or if it was too late. Dr. Reed crouched down, smiling. "It's never too late. Let me tell you about a cat named Jasper." As the day wore on, Grace, Sarah, Eli, and Sam found a quiet moment to sit together beneath the old maple tree behind the shelter. Jasper lounged between them, his purr a steady hum that seemed to unite the group in peace. Grace spoke first. "A year ago, I thought loving Jasper meant never letting go. But real love is braver than that. It's letting others in, letting the story grow. I'm not afraid of endings anymore." Sarah nodded. "Jasper taught me that there are no perfect families, only the ones we make with what we have. Blended, messy, full of history. Those are the ones worth holding on to." Eli grinned. "He's not just our cat anymore. He belongs to everyone. And that's kind of amazing." Sam looked around the circle. "You know, animals aren't the only ones who need second chances. People do too. Sometimes we just need to see it work once, to believe it's possible for ourselves." As the sun dipped lower, casting the whole shelter yard in warm, golden light, Jasper rolled onto his back, inviting a scratch from Eli, a gentle stroke from Grace, a kiss from Sarah. He was utterly content, a living bridge between the past and the future, proof that healing was possible, even beautiful, when love was allowed to stay and grow. Later, as the adoption fair closed, the last families packed up, and the staff swept the porch, Jasper was the last animal left outside. He watched the sunset with the quiet pride of a survivor who had become, somehow, a guide. Sam knelt beside him. "Ready to go home, buddy?" Jasper stood, stretched, and padded toward the car where both families waited. As they drove away, windows open, the wind ruffling Jasper's fur, it was clear he wasn't leaving one home for another. He was simply traveling between hearts, belonging in every place he was truly loved. And in that journey, he had changed everyone he touched. Not by erasing pain, but by showing that love multiplies when shared. Home, after all, is not made by walls or memories alone, but by the courage to embrace every new chapter, no matter how unexpected. In the end, Jasper's story was not about being lost or even found. It was about staying open, staying brave, and letting love write its own ending.